So I've been wanting to make a video on Hermetic principles for some time now, and now I have found a few reasons to do so. Number one, I am a Waldorf teacher. This is my first year teaching in a Waldorf education, and probably my last. I found myself with an opportunity to teach my daughter and her peers, having been a co-founder to the school, but teaching for well over a dozen years in other systems, be it international boarding schools, schools where students are deemed at risk, charter schools, or public schools. I didn't really have much time or attention to spend on Waldorf education. However, it's been my study of esoteric knowledge that's brought me in a roundabout way to Rosicrucianism and to Steiner, who was a member of the Rosicrucians, to his philosophies that consequently in the last 6 years of his life created Waldorf education. So through simple logistics of being a teacher who the village has essentially chosen because I have the experience teaching. If I was a baker, I'd be the baker. Just by default, I'm the teacher. And through my own interests, I find myself interested in Hermetic principles, the foundation of Rosicrucianism, where the philosopher Steiner created Waldorf education. Also, I think the real impetus is that I've just returned from a week-long trip to California, where my students finished studying oceanography and were introduced into art history. Going down to San Diego, whale watching, seeing dolphins, meeting another school, doing team building, having a ropes course, kayaking, being in the ocean, boogie boarding, camping the entire time, to then going to the Getty and the Broad and being exposed to masterpieces of different genres, from realism and the Renaissance into like pop art. And seeing the culmination of that trip, also really having a foundation of Hermetic principles, from the logistics of planning this, the principle of mentalism, to even getting along, the principles of vibration, the principles of gender, the principles of cause and effect, all of which I'll try to explain. So here we are, wanting to create a video that, if anything, it's simply for the parents of my students to understand what the hell it is I'm talking about when I mention Hermetic principles that I've introduced to 7th and 8th graders when doing a philosophy block, and understanding it was not near enough time of a study. It was not near as much time as I have spent on Hermetic principles to understand the impact that 7 universal laws can have on an individual in this existence versus man-made laws that are absolutely ambiguous and often placating to populations that perpetuate divide. So this is the sophomoric explanation. I've already provided the reasons why. Before I get into the Hermetic principles, it's important to talk about the origin. Now we have the Emerald Tablet of Hermes and we have the Corpus Hermeticum. These two things have been channeled, if you will, by someone called Hermes Trismegistus, which means Hermes thrice great. A person that people believe existed and people believe didn't exist. That is up for contention. The belief that this person existed is that they are the embodiment of Thoth and Hermes, another person that had all of this esoteric wisdom and passed it on from ancient times. Now, the people that don't believe he existed can get caught up in the personification, a legitimacy of an actual being rather than the message. And so what I'd like to do is just, if we could, contemplate the idea of Jesus Christ. Now, if you are a Christian, obviously you believe in Jesus Christ and you believe that he died for our sins and you shall be saved. If you come from a point of Christ consciousness and believe that his acts came from this godly will that understand the purpose of being human, or if you understand the Bible is just a great book and everything should be taken as metaphor, it doesn't matter to me, because what we're looking at as a foundation is the message. So let's just separate Hermes Trismegistus and whether or not he existed or not, and just look at literature that is some of our oldest literature to ever exist, something that traces back to 5,000 years. So, having that said, now here we go. Okay, the very first law, the principle of mentalism. The principle of mentalism is that all is in the mind is in the all. It would suggest that our thoughts are the impetus of all things. We create our reality through thought. Inversely, we are the extension of thought through God's imagination. Now, right there, we could get into a roadblock where people get stuck on the word God. So let's just set semantics aside and understand that God is all things. Meaning, if you come from a scientific slant, God is the Big Bang, is that cosmic explosion that is ever expanding our universe. You can look at the Bible and look at God, whatever you deem it to be, is the entity that spoke and light created. There is an origin, and it was his voice, sound, just like the cosmic explosion that has created everything. We could even look at esoteric illustrations such as the flower of life and look at the very center of it, which is the Godhead, which its first circle is the awareness that it exists, and all other concentric circles ever expanding more awareness, just like the universe ever expanding. So there's 3 examples of what I'm talking about, and that is essentially origin. All is in the mind is in the all. We are connected to something, and likewise, through our thought, can create. We are the extension of creation, and we are creator ourselves. A perfect example would be looking at the internet, something that is humankind's creation. And through that, we establish and insert content, and we extract information. It is a conduit. It is an extension of ourselves to connect to other beings that are also contributing. This web, if you will. There's the internet and there's the intranet. We can also understand that if the mind is in the all and the all is in the mind, the principle of mentalism suggests that we create through thought. Now, if you are going to be skeptic and say that, no, I can just think something, it comes to fruition. You're right, there are steps. But our thought elicits a feeling, and often we act on those feelings. In essence, there is thought, feeling, and will. In Sufism, it's called head, heart, and hands, something that's been adopted by Steiner and is introduced into Waldorf education. Whereas we introduce something that is briefly intellectualized, but then heartfelt, and then modeled by the symbol of our hands. So if you think that you don't create by thought, that is the origin of everything. And through all of the coincidences where you're like, I was just talking about that. Correct. There's other explanations in Hermetic principles on why that happens. But the main basis for the principle of mentalism is to know that the all is in the mind, and the mind is in the all. Interconnectedness. Now, the second law is the law of correspondence. As above is below, as below is above. Just as the tree extends its canopy upward and outward, so does its root system. Now, how we can work with this in our daily life is to understand that anything that we are observing is a reflection of ourselves. And from that, the danger would be eliciting an emotion that creates a reaction that is based in judgment versus just observing. The double slit experiment that has been explained through physics and quantum physics suggests that the mere act of observing changes that which is observed. By looking at something, it affects. And now we know that to be true, and if we've ever been on stage or speaking in public or playing a game, and when there's an audience there and a crowd, it affects our play unless we really get into a flow state. But we wouldn't know if anything's different because they are there witnessing. If they weren't there, we might have a different effect. We don't know because we're only in one specific time and space. The other thing with this correspondence is to understand the idea of reciprocity, giving and receiving energetically. If we give too much, we're depleted because we're not receiving. If we're receiving too much, we can be these gluttonous, greedy things that don't understand how to give, and becomes more material, right? And in that, there becomes these types of energies that I'll speak more about when we talk about polarity. But the essence of the principle of correspondence is understanding that whatever we're really looking at and contributing to or allowing to affect us is the mirror. My inner landscape affects how I perceive my outer landscape, and vice versa. How I'm perceiving my outer landscape affects my inward reality. That is the principle of correspondence. Now, the third law is the law of vibration. This one's a little bit more difficult, but quite interesting. It suggests that everything vibrates. Everything has a specific frequency. Now, I can simplify to have you just walk into your kitchen and nuke something in a microwave. And from that, we understand things are happening to that in order to heat it. We can't see it, but there are waves hitting that. I could also have you go to a puddle and drop a little pebble in it, and you see these waves go out. That is a physical manifestation of vibration, frequency, some of which we can see and some of which we cannot. But everything vibrates. This stool I'm sitting on is vibrating to a frequency that doesn't align with me. I'm able to see the stool because it vibrates. The universe is movement, and because of that vibration, I'm able to see it. Because I don't have the same frequency as the stool, I cannot assimilate with it. If I was the same frequency, vibration as this stool, I would be able to assimilate with that. Now, that might seem impossible. Like, how can one walk through matter? However, every religious text speaks of that. I'm not a Christian per se, but there's a reason there are metaphors in the Bible where Jesus appeared behind locked doors or walked on water, is because he was able to transcend the matrix, to align his frequency with that of matter, to assimilate with it and transcend it. Now, another more simple way of explaining the law of vibration, the law of, or the principle of this vibration, the principle of this frequency, would be if you're in a group and you're just vibing, right? And some people lift you up and some people can bring you down. It's because you are open to what is going on with them. And if you call yourself empathic, that might be because you're so open to other people's frequencies. You don't need to attach to that. You could if you need lifted up. It's our attachment to the emotions that really create the issue anyway. But that right there alone is the principle of vibration. Let's go on. One of my favorite principles is the fourth law, and that is the principle of polarity. I can simplify this and also put you in a mind knot by saying that for every belief, the exact opposite is equal and true. So the question isn't so much about what you believe, but why you believe anything at all. I would suggest to come from a place of faith rather than belief, because belief can paint you in a corner where you're limited on your perspectives and you start confirming your biases. Belief can have you so acutely aware of those things that you believe in that you aren't able to even see the things that are contrary, the things that challenge you, the things that could actually make you grow. A tree will fall without wind, so we need the polarity in order to grow and to understand where we are egoically in our life. Another example, and again to bring up something biblical, would be if you look at Christ's crucifixion at Golgotha, where he's up there being crucified, and on both sides of him are thieves, one of which is looking at Christ and believing in him and saying, "Take me with you, take me to your kingdom." And Jesus acknowledges him and says, "Yes, I will." And the other thief turning his back on Christ and saying, "Whatever, man." So what we have is, to one side, the one that is this uber spiritual light, Luciferian energy, and the other that is denying Christ, the darker, Hermetic energy that is denying. We might call that light and dark, not to be misconstrued with good and bad. They're both just paths, but the metaphor there is not to lean too heavily into one or the other, but to keep the middle path. If I had go back to the flower of life, where there is the Godhead and it has the awareness represented in that circle, and then from the circle another circle emerges, the awareness of awareness. What we have are two concentric circles, and in the middle is that little football shape, which is the Vesica Pisces, represented by our third eye. Our third eye is an example of seeing things without attachment, seeing things in various perspectives to understand all the parts of the whole, and not just looking at that part and believing that part. The law of polarity keeps us honest and allows us to develop compassion and empathy. The fifth law is the principle of rhythm. What goes up must come down. Just like the waves of the ocean, or like our winds that rise up mountains and come down mountains, or our sense of gravity, in a sense. There is a rhythm, and that is an absolute. It is our attachment to the highs that make the lows feel so bad. As humans, which I argue we are essentially spiritual beings having a human experience, we have the tendency to attach to all of these emotions and deny some of them, that which we have full right to exercise. It would be the reaction that comes from these emotions that we need to deal with. We are entitled, we are given all of these emotions, please let's have them, but let's not attach so badly that we're not willing to accept others. The rise and fall is absolutely necessary. We live in a world where it's very trendy to say, "I just want to live my best life." And that couldn't be one of the biggest mistakes that I've said to my older boys. I just want you to be happy. To insist on someone's happiness is to deny them the joy of understanding what sadness is, what understanding lament is, what is understanding angst, what understanding jealousy, what understanding all of the emotions that we have offered to us. When people say, "I just want to live my best life," they often forget that they're lacking gratitude for whatever they deem their worst life, because it is that worst life that they are judging that makes them think they need to have a best life to begin with. And without that, that best life would just be less than ordinary. So have gratitude for your worst life. And sure, go after your best life, but for Christ's sakes, just understand, it's just life. It's just life. This is a principle, it's a universal law, it's going to happen. You can't be here. We understand, even through understanding drug addiction, when people try to get here, then this becomes the bottom, and eventually it's just impossible. The highest becomes the lowest. Accepting what is our biggest challenge. The sixth law is the principle of cause and effect. Now, so for every effect, everything that we see and witness, we can make the assumption that there's a cause to it. The slippery slope of this is to actually believe our perception, not exercising the law of polarity, the law of mentalism, all of his other laws, to understand that we are subjectively selecting a cause, not understanding that the cause is an effect of another cause itself, and so on and so forth, down the rabbit hole, the Russian doll, where is the original cause, right? We could call it the butterfly effect, the idea that a butterfly can flap its wings in South America and cause a tsunami in Asia. So, although it is necessary for us to look at causes in order to correct our path, it would be understanding that looking at a cause is our complete subjectivity and our biases that is looking at these things. So, to not get caught up in all of those things, and to exercise law of polarity, to hear other perspectives in order to really gain an understanding that the cause might not necessarily be what we think it is, but to understand how we can take responsibility for our actions, knowing that everything that we do, originating from our thought into our feeling and our will, from our head to our heart to our hands, causes something. So understanding that we take more responsibility for things and aren't so flippant. We can also understand in contemplating the principle of mentalism that thought itself, no different than my speech, has a somatic. There is a frequency. There is a vibration. I can speak and things go from the formless into form. There is proof of somatics. I can take sand and put on a stainless steel square and take a violin string and vibrate it on there, and it takes form. The sand takes form of the resonance to that sound. The sound of my voice aren't just words, they're sounds, and they go from formlessness into form to actually create as depicted in the Bible. Our thoughts have the same thing. We deny those as being true because we can't see a thought no more than we can see a wave of a microwave, from the microwave heating our products or whatever. But it exists. It's just something to know. It's a universal law. That would be the principle of cause and effect, kind of expanded into other principles. But you can see how they're all working now. The last law, the seventh law, the last principle of Hermetic principles is the principle of gender. Now, this is a slippery slope right now because a lot of people attach onto gender and believe it's some type of construct, like time is a construct. It exists in this dimension because it is an extension of energy. There's masculine and feminine energy that is translated into this physical realm and our biology into being male and female. So masculine and feminine energy is not a construct at all. It is a reality. It is what is our basis of balance. We look at the yin yang, which is also a polarity. You wouldn't know light without dark. You wouldn't know 80 degrees if you hadn't experienced 90 or 70. Just like there's a polarity, are these energies, and both of those, as translated into our biology, and the male and female are what you need for creation. Here in this realm, we have the male and female in order to have creation, in order to reproduce, in order to evolve our species. Now, when there are movements that introduce other forms of gender or confuse or flip it, then it's messing with the simplicity of this dualism that, when together, creates a singularity. There is no creation with a made-up gender. Instead, there's just confusion. Additionally, it's more of an identity layer versus shedding it. We want to peel the onion, not add more shit on top of it. So, whether that is with your relationships, whether that is with your work, whether it's with your faith, your spirituality, your social situations. There are energies, and the best way to explain it is they're masculine and feminine energies. Our brain itself is divided into hemispheres that have male and female attributes. I'm not talking about genitalia. I'm talking about energies as far as structure and then aesthetic. Our body alone has the structure of a spine, the masculine energy, but of all of the organs of the feminine that are organizing and doing and helping us survive. There's the stability, and then there's the liveliness. So that would be the principle of gender. Now, why are all of these principles necessary? I feel they're necessary because they're simple laws. People can't recall the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of our Constitution. And if they would live a fruitful life here in the United States, understanding there's additional laws. But to know the Bill of Rights really helps you become a citizen, understands like how these things were founded. If we go back 5,000 years, we have universal laws that help us establish not on how to be a citizen of the United States, rather how to be a human. And I promise you, understanding those will help you understand what I'm introducing into a classroom and how I'm trying to connect with other humans, how I'm trying to live my life. And I might not be the best model of someone living their life, but I can tell you the freedom that I have here and here, and the evidence that I've seen here. Head, heart, hands. I just can't see it any other way, and that's probably because I'm accepting what is. And the reason I'm accepting what is because I exercise the Hermetic principles.